Yeah.
What are you doing?
Rubik's Cube.
Rubik's Cube. What episode is this?
Not so sure. Maybe 10?
Don't guess. I've got to get it right.
9?
Let me check.
I'm guessing it's 9. Maybe 9. We haven't done this in a while.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to the Minimalistic Muslim Podcast. How you doing, Iman?
I'm doing good, alhamdulillah. You?
I am not too bad. It has been a while.
Very long time, yes.
What's been going on? Where were we when we spoke last? It's been just before I went away.
Yeah.
Right. So I did a small announcement before I went away because I went to Dubai for a little while.
Yeah.
And had a nice little break. And on my return, whilst I was there, things started to get a bit funny.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But we'll come into that. But how's generally things been with you?
Everything's been fine, smooth. Yeah.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Enjoying the new arrangements?
Yeah.
Strange to many,
Yeah.
maybe. But a blessing for some, I guess. Right, guys. So before we jump into the show, because we've got a few, what would I like to say? Well, basically, it's the topic of the here and now. We're going to be talking about a few things. But what I'd like to say is first, one big announcement. We are now on YouTube.
Way.
Do we have some sort of claps?
I'm not sure.
I can't even remember.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so we are now officially on YouTube, that's right. So you can search us on Minimalistic Muslim and you'll be able to see this episode and our previous episodes on there. They are audio files, so it's exactly as you're hearing it now, but basically the reason is that we can now reach a wider audience.
Yeah.
So please share the links with your nearest and dearest, so they may be able to benefit from anything that we say. So what I'll do is I'll put the links in the show notes so you can actually send them across as well. So don't forget to subscribe on that. What you may notice is whilst I was, because this is all new to me as well, whilst I was transferring the files, the audio files, because when you upload them as a podcast, they're MP3. But when you whack them onto YouTube, you have to convert it to an MP4.
I don't understand anything you're saying.
You should. You're kind of techie.
Not with the audio, no.
All right. So anyway, so I'm educating you. So what you do is you have to convert it to an MP4 format, which is a video format. But in doing so, I've noticed, and those of you who are listening, let me know. You can write in the comments in the YouTube channel. There's sometimes a crackle in the voice, and I think that's due to the fact that the audio is compressed. So I'm just doing a few experiments just to tweak it to make sure I'm getting it as I want to. So hopefully this would be, I think the first one was all right because it was a WAV file, and hopefully this one because I'll upload it as a WAV file as well on YouTube. But that's enough talk of
Boring stuff.
Boring stuff. And now to the nitty gritty. So basically, yes, as I said, I was away for a while, and it's been a good month or so that we've decided to release an episode. And I guess it was because there was a lot going on. You know, everyone's everywhere. The world's kind of gone 180 degrees in such a short span of time. We've gone from living quite a normal life,
going outside, enjoying ourselves,
to go as and when you want to a fairly restricted, quote and unquote, lockdown.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to be talking about how it is. How's it been for you?
It's actually not a very big difference because I actually did stay at home quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I've been homeschooled for such a long time.
Yeah.
So nothing has really changed for me.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of cousins and everyone else has changed.
You know what? It's a very new experience for a lot of people because, as you said, we were quite blessed within the last few months, if not nearly coming on to a year. You longer, that we have been, as a family, be doing the home education together, and both mum and dad, me and your mum, have been participating in that, and so it's been quite normal.
Yeah,
there are people out there, like you're seeing videos now on social media, and it's comical, it's humorous that how people are finding it to be quite challenging and difficult because it's new. I mean, we made a conscious effort knowing how difficult it can be both mentally. It can be quite draining to be kind of engaged with the education element of it. It's quite easy to just have an easy day, laid back, switch on the TV, forget about it, do another day. And for me, I guess, because I see myself as fairly disciplined, and if I knew I was going to be like that, I wouldn't have chosen it. But you can see that people are having a whale of a time with this. Like, teachers don't know what they need to be doing. People being told to work from home as well. They don't really know what they're supposed to be doing. It's very new. Okay.
Coronavirus.
Oh dear. Okay. Is that a joke or is that serious? Dude, where's my mask? Okay. You throw me off track now. What was I saying?
Yeah, you were saying how it's different and new for people. Yeah,
so it's a very fairly new experience just for that being at home situation. And when I just look at that, it can either be a blessing for some because they haven't spent time with their families and they've been working away, or their focus has been at the house. And now, subhanAllah, in a funny way, there's an opportunity where families can come together and kind of reconnect, because we've spoken previously about things like technology and how you can live in a house, but yet people are doing different things. But now people are they're kind of forced in a way to come together and do things. So it can be a blessing because some people may really want that, but some people are so used to their independence that for them, they may be pulling the hair out, like, I want to get out of here kind of a thing. So it's a test for others, I guess. The funny thing, I guess, for me was when I was coming back, when I was there was not much of
the panic.
The panic, yeah. You heard it, right? So, we heard this thing happening in China, Wuhan specifically, and then you just kind of felt that it was something happening in some other part of the world.
To us, yeah.
You didn't really understand the severity of it, so it was just like, I'd tap into the news just to see what was going on, but it kind of said, oh, this is happening in China and it's all going crazy and but life seemed normal. Okay. And this is when I was in the Middle East, so it seemed quite normal. Everyone's getting about their daily business, no real craziness going on, families, people out and about, everything is quite as it is. I guess towards the last few days, all right, before I was due to fly back to the UK, you kind of got a sense that this stuff because at that time, I guess it started to kind of come into the UK. So now instead of following what was happening in China or Wuhan, I was now looking at what was happening to the UK. And you saw like the first
2-3 people like getting.
Yeah, I think there was a flight coming down and they quarantined them for 14 days. And that's where it started, right? And didn't think much of it. Thought, okay, it'll go, kind of go.
Come and go.
Yeah, like that. It'll just go, right? When I was flying back, we were making little jokes like, okay, have I got my hand sanitizer? I'm gonna wash my clothes, or go home, have a shower, and all this, to make sure I don't get touch anyone or hug anyone or anything like the other, right? So, but anyway, we got off at Heathrow and everything was fine. No,
so there was like no checks or anything.
No checks. Walked straight through. There was nothing happening. It was like a normal. Nothing. You couldn't have said that there was any sort of thing happening. I've said this many a times. I said there's often 3 kinds of people, right?
Okay. When
things like this happen, you can kind of put them in 3 different. I don't like to put people in boxes, but I'll say 3 different boxes, okay. Right? One are the people who, when things like this happen, they think, whatever, I'm going to live my life. I want to carry on doing what I do until I get told I can't do it, right? So they'll ignore government advice. They'll just do what it is they want to do. You'll get the people in the middle who are the preppers, who prepare. So they're not sure of what's going on, but they take the stance of, I'll just prepare just in case. All right. So we're not talking about panickers, because that's the third one. They're the ones who you've seen who have been buying up all the toilet paper. Yeah. All right. So you're like, what's going on there? And it's funny, and it's kind of annoying, because generally you see stockpiling happening towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
When supermarkets are like closing for one day. I think it's Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And then the whole supermarket goes crazy, like it's not going to open up again. So people start, buying all of these stuff. So you see it once a year, and even to me, I chuckle a bit because I'm like, come on, guys, what's going on, right? But this toilet paper incident where you had, I think it was hand washers and sanitizers and toilet paper, right?
Yeah.
So these three items were being sold out of these supermarkets, and I was quite. No, I was kind of the fortunate ones because I wasn't here at that time, but I did say to your mum, listen, just get a couple because you know how people go do things right at the end, right? So just get yourself a couple, and then that way we know we're going to be all right for a week or so, and then we'll see. So it was interesting to see that you could see over the course of the days when I got back that it shifted. You could go on something like the internet, and people were selling these items at ridiculous
really
prices, right? So as an example, a 50ml hand sanitizer, which you can probably pick up for 50p, is now being sold at £10. All right.
That's really bad.
And people like eBay and Amazon have now got a grasp of that, and they're starting to ban people who are selling it at these ridiculous rates. But it just goes to show that it just goes to show that how people can profit from fear and just at the expense of others, which is quite sad in a way. I'm glad to see that things have started to normalize. I mean, I and Dado went out for not the first time. I mean, I've been out a few times. I have been abiding by the strict guidelines as you go out and you try to keep 2 meters away from people, and you listen to what the government asking you to do because you're none the wiser. You're thinking, okay, right, we're all in this together, so we've got to do all our respected things and just keep our distances, as they say, right?
Yeah.
So a few. I think the first time me and your dad went out, we went to one of the supermarkets, and she was smiling, and she was just like, I'd never thought that I'd see this, that I'm having to queue 40 minutes 2 meters apart from the next person in front of me to get in and buy like a standard. You could have just bought a loaf of bread, but you'd have to wait 40 minutes before you go in, right?
Yeah.
And it's quite an interesting experience to have. Everyone was respecting one another, and you saw there was no chaos, so it was quite interesting how people were behaving. But having said that, so as I said, as a family, and everyone's listening to government advice, and we're doing what we're told, kind of a thing, doing what we're told. All right, so that's interesting, right? It wasn't until when everyone was kind of restricted. All right, so you haven't got the distraction of work or friends. You're having to stay at home, and a lot of people are, what do I do, kind of thing, right? And so I started to look at what the narrative was on social media. So I understood what the government is trying to tell me. And when I went onto social media, you've now got a different version of events and a different narrative. And that's what I want to explore, right? So it's not to say what's right, what's wrong, but it's interesting to have a dialogue and a chat about the possibilities of different narratives and why they can or are making sense, right?
Yeah.
So as you know, this stuff started kicking off in China.
Yeah.
Right, and more specifically in a region called Wuhan. And then it's kind of, I think in Europe it started to hit Italy.
Yeah.
And you've had Spain.
Spain as well, yeah.
Yeah. It's, I mean, currently I think they said it's overtaken Italy, right?
Okay.
But at that time when this was happening, when it came into Europe, especially with those two countries, I don't know if you remember, but we were very relaxed. This is when schools were open.
Yeah.
Everything was normal. Our PM, bless him, Bojo, right, was saying that there's no need for any extreme measures. Everything is fine. We've got the medical research doesn't suggest that we need to do anything right now. So people started to get a bit skeptical because they now thought that, hold on, this is getting closer to home.
Yeah.
Remember when I said it was in China, it was somewhere, a lot of people didn't really batter. They were just carrying on with their normal lives. But now when it's coming to Europe, you're in Italy, you're in Spain, you're like, okay, these guys are now decided to lock their countries down. All right. And we're watching this in the news, and, I'm not sure if they've got curfews, but they're not allowed out. And if they are, they have to, they're restricted to what and what they can't do. All right. So yeah, you can go out and get medicines and get essential foods and exercise, but something that's not deemed essential, then you can get fined potentially. All right. Yeah. So this now thing, these kind of events are now, they're like coming closer to home. So now the British people, the majority, or the ones I talk to and I see on social media, are getting a bit nervous because they're thinking, hold on, European countries are deciding to lock down. We're kind of saying, hey, it's all right, we're good. Yeah, we don't need to strike yet. But it's not like he said we're not doing it. He says I don't see the scientific reasoning to do it now. But if it needs to change in the future, we'll do so, right? So everything was, Britain was open for business, whether it was flights, whether it was businesses, whether it was schools, everything was normal. Okay. I guess the only thing that you would start to notice is the madness in shopping. So people did start to get a bit worried. And I think at that time, people weren't really convinced with the government narrative. They were, I guess, preparing to say, right, you know what, let me just in case, take some of, take some extra stuff, right? What I didn't like, all right, is the narrative of the masks, okay? Because I don't know if you remember, they were saying that,
masks don't change it. Yeah, doesn't help. Yeah. I heard that too. Right,
so that's exactly what they're saying. They're saying, hey, don't bother with masks. They don't work. If anything, they just prevent you from spreading it to other people. Okay. Yeah. And what you saw is a surge of the public buying masks, because you saw images of China. Everyone's wearing these surgical masks.
Yeah.
Then you saw images in Europe, and people are buying all these masks. I was introduced to this video, this YouTuber, and it's only because he speaks about masks that he ranked quite high. All right.
Yeah.
And he was talking, a sensible young lad. And I think he's been running his channel for the last 5-6 years, and he's just fascinated with masks. Okay. But what he was saying, and he had an argument, which I agreed with, and this is where my kind of mindset changed slightly. And he said, I don't like the way the government is saying that you shouldn't buy masks because they don't help. He goes, that's wrong. Masks do help, but you need to educate the people as to what kind of masks they need to buy. So, for example, he was saying that, listen, if you get surgical masks, they don't work. Then you have these P1 filters, P2 filters, P3 filters. The P3 ones are, the most protective because they protect like 95% of infectious diseases, right?
Yeah.
So that's education. So you're like, okay, they do. And
There's
I'll come
certain ones.
Yeah. And I'll come to that later on, as when you started seeing the panic buy more aggressively, then this kind of stuff kind of kicked out. But then over the next few days, you did eventually see the UK being put under lockdown. All right. So schools were shut, businesses were shut, and there was a big, think about it, it's people's livelihoods. You've got self-employed people who've got these high street shops. No, we're not talking about the big corporations. They can take a nick, but these guys who've probably decided to open up a business and put everything into it and now been told to shut it, that could ruin someone. That's it done. Could they reopen? And so you had this going on, and then the government comes out, and says that, you know what, don't worry, we're going to help you. Yeah. People don't need to get rid of any staff. We'll pay 80% of your wages. And then they plan to put in, I don't know if it was like 330 billion,
that's a lot of money.
Into helping the employers to make sure that, they can carry on with their businesses for, I think it was 3 months. All right. Then you had the argument with the mortgage and the renters, how are we going to pay our rent? How are we going to pay our mortgage? And they did the same thing to say, listen, we will pay there'll be a holiday for 3 months. God knows what you do after that, whether you pay that and more plus interest. But right now, they seem to be wanting to win the hearts and minds of the people. So I had a few question marks. I'm just like, right, okay, so you now have got all this money. Where's this come from?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about we don't have the money for this and we don't have the money for that. Now, all of a sudden, you've got £330 billion and someone's going to have to pay this because this is money printed. Where's this come from? Who's paying this back? And we haven't been given that. It's just the details that some people are asking for, but we're not getting, right?
Yeah.
And then we've got 13.4 billion debt written off of the NHS. So remember, the NHS is and the National Health Service, right?
Yeah.
We've known and we've heard in the news, I don't know if you have, that it's under, it's under a crisis in its own. Before all of this stuff happened, purely to do with it's not being funded correctly. You're seeing hospitals shut. You're seeing various hospitals merge with different places, and there's a lot of strain on the nurses and the doctors. And in terms of salary, are they getting what they want? They're taking pay cuts and all of that. So you heard a lot of stuff about the NHS. Now suddenly, you've got 13.4 billions worth of money that the government says we'll write it off. So again, where's that money coming from? And why wasn't this pumped into the NHS when, it just goes to show them, why is it being done right now? If we know that it could have been done, because the government saying we don't have the money to do this, we don't have the money. Clearly they do. All right. So, the question for me was, why let the NHS get into so much debt knowing that it's at a crippling stage. And we know that, as I said, it's been underfunded for at least the last decade. That's where my kind of eyebrow was just like, okay, all right. So having heard that, the other thing, like when I was saying to you about the masks, so that's what that guy was saying, right? When we were told, or when we saw, especially in Italy and Spain, that now doctors and nurses are getting what's called PPE, right? So this is called personal protection equipment. Whenever you do certain kinds of jobs, you need to make sure you have the right protective equipment in order to carry out your job, so you're not a threat onto somebody else and they're not a threat to you. So in the cases of these guys, medical professions, we're looking at masks, surgical gloves, aprons, gowns, hats, possibly suits, depending on if they are put in intensive care, right? And then we're getting told that there's not enough PPE for these doctors and nurses, all right? So now people are having to kind of risk themselves, knowing that, let's go with the government narrative, that there's this virus, it spreads very easily, very quickly. You've got to be very careful with yourself in terms of your washing. You've got to keep these 2 meters ruling. And then you put your frontline NHS staff in a position where they don't have the correct uniform in order to deal with people that are potentially, quote unquote, got this coronavirus. Okay? And you started hearing doctors and nurses speaking out and kind of challenging and to say to the government, what's going on? Why has this taken so long? If we're told that this stuff is happening, people are potentially dying because of this, and now we're asked to put our lives on the line. Potentially, we could be taking that virus and spreading it to our family and our loved ones. What's the logic in that? All right. So now, like I said, you know, for me personally, you've come from a narrative of where you're trying to listen to what the government is saying in terms of advice. And then when you sit and you're thinking and you're now looking at what they're saying and you're hearing another narrative, the two don't kind of marry up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's where I personally started having a bit of a problem with this, because I'm like, okay, people are asking questions and their questions need answering. And if we're not getting suitable answers that can quench the thirst of these people, including myself, then what are we doing? All right. In terms of one of my first point of contacts is to get some sort of understanding in terms of a religious perspective. All right.
Okay.
And it's safe to say, I think a lot of ulama would say that, you know, we are living at times and, you know, uncertain times, even to say we are living at a system where, you know, when we read in Islamic books about a system that is almost like a Dajjalic system. All right. And, you know, people would now understand this a lot in depth because now people are experiencing certain things. There are scholars out there, and I guess I started to listen to this sheikh maybe just after you were born. So we're going back
Wow.
over 10 years, all right? Imran Hussein, okay?
Yeah.
And what I liked about him is he has kind of dedicated his latter life towards Islamic eschatology. And in doing so, he kind of narrates, describes, explains various hadith to explain certain narratives as to how events are unfolding today and how they were predicted by the Prophet ﷺ, and how they're unfolding in front of our eyes. And yet some people are unknown. Don't know what's going on. So, he's got like 2 PhDs. He knows economics. That's what he's got his PhD in. So he's what interested in me, because I've got a banking background. So he spoke about finance and money. And I never saw a sheikh speak like that before when it came to money. Well, I mean, a lot of people have, and I respect them in terms of they have their expertise in their fields. So he doesn't track into anything. He tracks on what he knows. So he's talking about economics and finances, saying how the federal government works and how money is manipulated and how the US dollar works and why gold was taken away and intrinsic values. And he's giving you all this knowledge. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, you know what? I've never heard a sheikh speak like this before, because you expect them just to talk about how to pray, sadly. We need more heads like him who can understand the world that we live in and interpret it for the newer generation. And he does it so eloquently. And it's probably one of the reasons that as a point of, for me, a point to go to say, okay, what's he saying about this? Okay. And he made a video. It's funny. He made a video maybe 12, 13 years ago in which he describes that there will be a time where the Hajj gets abandoned. All right. And it's possibly due to, they will say it's possibly due to a virus. Now, he said this 12, 13 years ago, and I'll link that video up as well. It's about a 10, 15-minute video clip. And he's done various videos after that, and he kind of explains that, what he meant by that. And you could possibly, potentially see that happening. I'm not sure if the Hajj ministry has, as we know, currently, the Haram is closed. All right. And it's the first time, I believe, in my lifetime that that's happened. From my understanding, it's happened a handful of times before. But to see the Haram closed, you cannot worship around the Kaaba, you cannot go to the Prophet's mosque. And you're seeing that. And then here he says that there's a hadith that says that the Hajj will be abandoned. And we are near Ramadan now. All right, we're finishing Sha'ban soon, And then will or will not the Hajj be allowed to happen? Will it be abandoned this year? These are things, these are kind of scary times, but then you can see that how events are unfolding and how they were said that they would happen. So for me, I went back to him, and when he says that, they could say it's released by this and it could be skepticism. In other words, it's not actually, this is the reason that's what's going to happen. They're going to get you skeptical about whether it happened or it didn't happen. Okay. So after that, I tried to look for people who were making a bit of noise with a different kind of narrative.
Okay. Yeah.
It didn't take me long, to find similar-minded people who have been talking about their version of what's going on for a number of years. I don't want to get into any conspiracies, but what I do is is whenever someone talks, I look at their history. Like, how long have you been saying this version of events for? Have you been saying it all the time, or have you been saying it just now? And there's a lot of people saying things right now. Okay, and I'll come to that, because that's fine, because your level of understanding changes. But there's various individuals. Looking at individuals who've kind of had a narrative and have been saying it along for a very long time and have had to take the heat for it many times as well. Okay, throughout their lives. So I want to say a few things, and I just want you and the listeners just think with an open mind as to see whether what is happening. Not saying it's not happening, but there may be other reasons and there may be other things. So it's just listening to this with an open mind and thinking, okay, possibility. When you open your mind to that, then your opening yourself to other possibilities. You're looking at things holistically, not being narrow-minded. So wherever knowledge comes from, take it. By all means, if you want to dissect it, do so. But know that don't just be clueless on one way. All right? And I'll come to the reason as to why later. So, I'm going to take you on a journey. All right? So let's look at this. All right? So let's look at the virus in itself. Okay? You've got supposedly a pandemic, and it's affecting everyone. This virus is very, very, what was the word? Contagious. Yeah. All right? And the hospitals are preparing for it. You've got morgues being created. You've got all this additional money and resources being spent because they're like, something's happening. We're going to have all these mortalities and people are going to die. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at the stats, and you can Google this stuff. I'm not making this stuff up, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at the death rate of people dying of normal causes, everything grouped together, so heart attacks, strokes, flus, everything, mm-hmm. and you look at last year's figures, you will find that adding the coronavirus to that list of deaths hasn't spiked the number of deaths. We're actually on par, which means equal or averaged to the figures of last year. Okay. So number one, raised eyebrow. If the virus is contagious and it's killing these people, why has the rate of deaths not increased to how it was last year? Why are the same amount of people dying? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's question number one. Number two, what is the coronavirus? Okay, we've had this term a lot. It's been, you hear it in the media, you're hearing it in social media, it's everywhere, coronavirus. And the funny thing is, you remember the Dettol wipes that we've got?
Yeah,
right?
It says it on there.
Right, so you reverse that, and anyone who's got these Dettol wipes, if you look at the back of it, it will say, will protect you from coronavirus. Okay, so now, this thing cannot be new then, all right, because it's been printed on something. So what does that mean? Coronavirus is a virus that messes with your respiratory system, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay, wait, what is that? Sorry?
So it's a virus that messes around with your respiratory system. So like your lungs and breathing and all of that, okay? And it is no different to, wait for it, the common cold or the yearly flu known as influenza, all right?
Okay.
So when someone says coronavirus is also the cold. It's also the normal flu, which is why you heard this thing in the press saying it's got flu-like symptoms. All right, because it's like a spread of the original flu, but coronavirus itself is like having the cold. All right. Mm-hmm. So the terminology, you see shifts. You see coronavirus. You see COVID-19, okay? Mm-hmm. COVID-19 meaning, do you know what that means? I think I said this to you before.
Yeah, so the COVID part was the coronavirus.
Yeah.
And then what was the D?
Disease.
And then the 2019.
2019, all right? So you got coronavirus, COVID-19, you've got I'm going to say about wording. So you've got two different words being thrown out there, coronavirus, COVID-19. But coronavirus is something that could be related to the common cold and the normal flu. And we know statistically, as an example, I haven't got the UK figure sadly, but in America, as an example, 1 billion people get the flu every year. That's one with 369 noughts, okay? 1 billion people get the flu every year. Out of that, approximately 650,000 people die, okay, of the flu. Mm-hmm. This is a coronavirus, of the normal flu. That's 0.07%, approximately. If it's 700,000, it'd be 0.07%. So just under that, okay? That's how many people would die generally. And as we know, it affects, statistics proved it's changed now, but they've said it hits the elderly more. People whose respiratory systems aren't as strong as people who are young and healthy, okay? So there's that point.
Okay.
The other point, I urge you to listen to how the media talk when it comes to death rates of COVID-19. Okay?
Okay.
You will often find them use this quote, so-and-so has died after testing positive from COVID-19. Okay?
Okay.
So they'll say, so-and-so has died after testing positive for COVID-19. Just this morning, there was a doctor that they said had just died after testing positive for COVID-19. What they're not saying is that so-and-so has died from COVID-19.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That means that,
Okay.
do you see what I'm saying?
But you like, okay, for example, it says they've been tested positive.
Yep.
So doesn't that mean that they could have died from it?
That's not what they're saying, though.
So tested positive after.
So that's what I'm saying. They're saying that so-and-so has died after testing positive for COVID-19. So you've tested positive on a drug or on a illness or on a flu. Okay. You could have had a heart attack. That's what's killed you.
Oh, right.
But because you've tested positive for that supposedly COVID-19.
So you could have died from something else.
No, yeah, but they're not saying that. They're saying you have died
after being
tested for COVID-19. If you had died because of this, they would have said you've died because of COVID-19. The wording.
Okay.
All right. So next time you look on the news, check this wording out, and you'll be like, okay, it's interesting. All I'm saying, all I want to do is put questions out there in your minds. All right. Just for that, so that you can think more in a holistic way and say, okay, I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to just let you think, to say, okay, there is another narrative. Consider that. And that's it. And if you find any benefit to that, then fair enough. Okay. For me, that's when I guess the water started to get a bit murky. I couldn't see clarity in what was being said anymore. All right. Let's go back to this so-called virus. We're told, as you said, that this virus is very contagious.
Yeah.
Hence the lockdown. This is why we're having the lockdown, because we're saying, guys, stop mingling with one another. Keep this 2 meter distance. If you're with your families, you guys stick together. Don't go out as much. Don't go out in parks, public. Don't do all of that stuff. Why? Because it can be transmitted very easily, right?
Right.
Well, how would you feel if I said to you that there's on the government website,
right,
which you can go to, and I'll again put this link down, there's a description of what's known as HCIDs, all right?
Okay.
And this is where the government write a list or do give their advice on the HCID, which is high consequence infectious diseases. All right. So diseases that you can pass very quickly. All right. So they've put COVID-19 on there. You'd be happy to know. All right.
Okay.
But let's see what they say. And like I said to you guys, I will put this link, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can go away and have a little read and think for yourself on what this says. So under this gov.uk website, under HCIDs, it says status of COVID-19. As of 19th of March 2020, so it's a few weeks old, but it hasn't been updated, okay? And we were in lockdown at that time. As of 19th of March 2020, COVID-19 is no longer considered to be a high consequence infectious disease in the UK. The Four Nations Public Health, HCID group, made an interim recommendation in January 2020 to classify COVID-19 as a HCID. So they did initially, okay, when it was first diagnosed, they said it was. This was based on consideration of the UK HCID criteria about the virus and the disease with information available during the early stages of the outbreak. Now that more is known about COVID-19, the public health bodies in the UK have reviewed the most up-to-date information about COVID-19 against the UK HCID criteria. They have determined that several features have now changed. In particular, more information is available about mortality rates, which is in parentheses, low overall.
Mm-hmm.
And there is now greater clinical awareness and specific and sensitive laboratory tests, the availability of which continues to increase. All right.
Okay.
Now, you may say, what is that? HCID.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what is it?
It's
So
no longer.
So they're now saying it's not part of this HCID
Right,
criteria. All right. So what is a HCID criteria? Just in case there's some people out there that think, okay, maybe the criteria doesn't involve that. This is what the definition of HCID is in the same article. It says, in the UK, a high consequence infectious disease, or HCID, is defined according to the following criteria. Number 1, acute infectious disease,
Okay.
which you're told that it is,
Yeah.
typically has a high case fatality rate, so you can die from it,
Mm-hmm.
which you're told it is. Often difficult to recognize and detect rapidly, right?
Okay.
Ability to spread in the community and within healthcare settings.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Yeah. Requires an enhanced individual population and system response to ensure it is managed effectively. Listen to that again. Requires an enhanced individual
Mm-hmm.
or population and system response to ensure it is managed effectively, which another word means you've got to put people in lockdown
Yeah.
for you to manage it because it's contagious. Okay? So, how's that?
It's quite a bit. Okay.
So this is a government, this isn't
It's
no
actually on there,
conspiracy.
yeah.
This is, you can go on to www.gov.uk HCID and you can read this stuff, all right? And they update it. And the last time they updated it, if it was rubbish, they would have taken it off and they would have said
Yeah.
as of so-and-so, right? Because we're in April now.
Yeah.
But they still agreed that it is not a threat. So how come it's on a website? Yeah, everyone in the media is going on about, no, it's contagious. It's very contagious. You've got to stay away. You've got to do this and the other. It's
Yeah.
just a thought. Have a think about it, So, okay. So I read that. And now I'm like, what is going on here? All right.
Yeah.
So we're told by the website that it's not as bad or it's not as contagious as we're told. And we are being told as we've spoken about. Politics is politics. People's narrative is changing. You've got people like Nigel Farage, really nice guy, okay, who is kind of saying that we are all under house arrest. All right, this is where we're at. This is what we are told. We're told what to do, how to behave, what to do. This is in accordance to called a house arrest. Why does he call it that? Because he's saying that today, or as of now, the UK, which is under lockdown, is still allowing flights to come into the UK from places like New York,
Mm.
places like China, Italy, and there are no tests being done at the airports, whether you're taking a reading to see if they've got a fever. Nothing is being done, and they're just being allowed to walk straight in and just, go straight into society.
Mm.
So he's like saying, and obviously he's probably playing politics, but something is not right.
Mm.
Why are we all told that we must be locked down, and yet you haven't closed borders with these countries? What do you think?
Well, yeah, what you say is quite true. That's actually really I didn't know that.
Strange.
So I thought by now they would have done at least something. That's what I would have thought, because I know that I remember when watching the news, they were saying stuff like they're not allowing flights now or something.
Yeah.
And now you're saying they are allowing.
Well, yeah,
flights.
people can come into this country, but his argument is that why are you not
You're not quarantined.
there are no checks happening at the airport.
Mm.
All right. And yet, if you go on to, no one's talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to go out your way to find this kind of information. The narrative you're being fed is the same narrative everyone else is being fed. So whether we choose to agree to that or think differently is entirely up to us.
Yeah.
You can, there is, like I said, you've got it on a website.
Mm.
You just got to you got to dig a bit deeper, and you can get the information to say, what's going on? Why are you now telling me it's not a high contagious infectious disease, yet you're going around on the mainstream media saying that it is?
Right.
This isn't would you call it, conspiracy theorist saying this. This is on your government website. Yet at the same mouth, you're saying, no, it's very contagious and you've got to stay away. It doesn't make sense. Which is why I said, Let's be open to more transparency, and let's ask questions, right?
Yeah.
This leads me to the second part of this argument. Have you heard of 5G?
Yes.
Dun, dun, dun. 5G.
Yes.
The world is going mad with this 5G stuff, right? And you can't blame them.
True.
Because what's happening is the government is not answering questions that people want answers for. One of which is we're told that only essential workers or key workers are allowed to go out and work. So you've got doctors, nurses, people obviously working in the supermarkets, everyone else at home. And now people are questioning, if you go on social media, because the mainstream isn't showing this, why, oh why, over this time when we're all put under lockdown, are all these 5G masts being put up? It's a relevant question.
Okay, yeah.
Some people are seeing them being put up. Some people are saying, look, this wasn't here last week, and there's images. Again, just Google and go on your social media. I am sure, actually, I am confident that you have Facebook groups, even Facebook groups, or even WhatsApp groups where comments like these are being exchanged with you, where people are saying to you, look, this 5G stuff is going. Now, you can say that they're crazy, or after listening to the first part of the show, you can look to say, okay, if this narrative doesn't suit, and could it be something more sinister? Is something else being played out right now? And whilst we're all being put under lockdown over something that's no deadlier than the flu, something else is going on. All right? So it's a question. Now, if we go back and we talk about 5G, this whole thing started in a town or a city in China called Wuhan. Wuhan has two things that are linked to this story.
Okay.
It was the first city in the world to switch on 5G. Number one. It also has, I think 20 miles away from it, China's level 4 bioweapons lab, 20 miles away from there. So what I mean by that, they have a lab which they kind of mess around with viruses in that lab.
Oh, wow.
Okay? Is it a coincidence that you've got 5G switched on, you've got a lab that deals with messing around with viruses in the same city? Again, a question. All right? It's like saying, you like Columbo, right? Watching Columbo, right? It's like saying that you have someone died in a place, and they died in a manner which was done by a serial killer. Oh, and by the way, 20 miles away, there happens to live a serial killer. Could it be that person did it? All right? So you have to ask questions. Yeah? And you have to start thinking like, is it sitting well? I'm not sure. There's an article. All right, I'm going to find it now. It's in the Business Insider. Let me have a look. I think I did save it. No, it didn't. Okay, check this out. So there's a website called businessinsider.com. This is published by a man called Adam Payne, dated 6th of April. Okay?
Okay. When this article came out?
Yeah.
Okay.
In it says, Boris Johnson's government has considered the possibility that the coronavirus may have accidentally leaked from a Chinese lab.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Need to put your Columbo hat on now. All right? I won't spoil it for you. You guys can go ahead. I'll put the links in the description. Go away and have a read. This information is out there. Have a read. Make up your own minds. But, don't take things lying and thinking, okay, this is what's happening. Just got to go along with it when something else at play could be happening. All right? After that, I started to watch two individuals. Okay. One's a nurse, and what she said, her name is Kate Shamani. I believe I'm saying her name correctly, right? And she did this video in which I think she's doing a radio interview, and she's explaining the effects of 5G.
Okay.
All right. This isn't an educational lesson. I myself am not very well versed with this technology, but I would let the so-called experts give their narrative for you to judge. All right. So one of the things she talks about is she takes that example in Wuhan.
Yeah.
She goes, you saw pictures of people just falling over dead in Wuhan. They walk in and boom, bodies falling everywhere. Okay. And her argument is viruses don't do that. You can't just fall over. The science and the biology behind it is that people fall when there's a lack of oxygen in your cells. All right?
Okay.
And her argument goes on to say is that the 5G, which supposedly is obviously not supposedly is switched on in Wuhan, was interfering with the cells of the people, drawing out oxygen and making the people collapse and die. Doesn't seem far-fetched when an argument is given such a way, okay?
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who live near 5G masts, who are troubled by thinking, could I be radiated by this? You know, is it with the cells and the oxygen? There is something you can buy which is called an oximeter. Costs £15. All right. And what you do, and some of you may have had this when you go to hospitals, is that the nurse would clip something on your finger, and it like beams out this red light, and on it will tell you the percentage of oxygen that your body has in its cells. And I believe that the rate has to be between 93 to 99 or 100%. Okay. And that's a simple test that you can do to know that it's not meddling with the cells in terms of the oxygen in your cells. All right. So that's something I did. I went and purchased it, tested all you guys. Alhamdulillah, we're all, everyone's fine. But for those of you who fear that you're living near mosque, I would strongly recommend purchasing one of those. And kind of just having that kind of kit doesn't cost hardly anything, just for your own satisfaction to see, is that affecting me? Do I see that I have a problem? And it will beep. That if it tells you that you haven't got enough oxygen, it will beep. It's like, for example, when sometimes you sit down and you get up very quickly and you get a bit of that's what it is. The oxygen hasn't gone to your brain very quickly. So it's to do with that. So that's for you. Have a look, these arguments out there. And to me, I find them nothing but interesting. And it gives me another perspective to look at. Number 2, when I started to hear more about this 5G, you're now seeing momentum on this. There are masts, I believe, in Birmingham. There's one near I think in Watford, being burned. All right.
Burned?
Yeah, people are setting these masts on fire because they are now. They feel that this is to do with the 5G technology. This is no longer to do with any virus. This is to do with 5G. Okay, so there are people out there actively on social media making these groups, getting people together to go out and do such acts now.
That's very dangerous.
Yeah, but look, people are going to desperate needs require desperate measures, right? When people get into an act of desperation, if you're told that you live near a place which is radiating, you're living in a microwave basically. What are you going to do? So unfortunately, if the government are not addressing these points, and I haven't seen it in mainstream media that these points are getting addressed. Have these dialogues, have these discussions, explain to people how this tech works. Have there been enough independent tests done on it so that people can be rest assured that there is nothing in this stuff? Then people can say, right, okay, we've had a constructive conversation, yes or no. All right. But rolling it out and just asking us to put our heads under the carpet and you're putting up these masks, people are entitled to ask these questions. All right. I saw something in the tabloids which said something about this. They made a small little article saying that these idiots going out thinking that all this is because of 5G, don't they know? But that's not how you counter argue something. All right. You've got all of these scientists, medical professions, people of knowledge telling you that there is something. All right. And not enough test has been going on about it. You need to have this discussion. Get a discussion between someone who knows what they're talking about and not someone who just follows your narrative, because that way you're confusing them. You're confusing the masses even more. Okay. Then I've come to probably the most controversial figure when it comes to do with 5G. Okay. And I'm a bit upset. Okay. And I'm not so upset with what this individual has to say. I'm upset with the way it's been handled. And that raises more questions, okay? So basically, I follow a guy called Brian Rose, all right? And he has a channel called London Real.
Yeah.
And in which, it's a podcast, and it's where he gets interviews, basically, thinkers, and people who are the movers and shakers of society, right? He's been up and running for 9 years. He's done well for himself, has some sort of sincerity in what he does, okay? Again, an ex-banker, decided to give it all up, and he's been quite successful with this. And he's had no issues and no problems. And he gets people on, which are guests who may not share the same narrative as he does. And he does make a point on saying, listen, I don't agree with everything that people may be saying, but I will defend your right to say so. Fair play. I think any sane human being would do the same, right? He interviews a person by the name of David Icke.
Yeah.
Now, David has been on a mission for the last 30 years in which he has a narrative of what he sees around him. The world that we're living in is not what it means, what we are, okay?
What do you mean by that?
So, like, everyone's, he talks about various individuals. He talks about Freemasonry. He talks about Illuminatis. He talks about
the conspiracy theories.
yeah. I mean, he is that. There is no doubt about it. There are certain things that you can put a question mark next to it, and you may not be convinced. But there are certain things like this that even I am saying, you know what? There's a possibility. So what you shouldn't do is rule out a madman and say that everything he says is wrong.
Right.
You see, we live in really strange times in which that if you do not agree with my narrative, gone are the days where you could assassinate people and you'd be like, these don't, just whatever, right? We live in a time now of what he calls a technocracy, right?
Technocracy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So people who are now heading up technologies, whoever owns technology owns the world, in other words. Okay?
Yeah.
So the way in which to destroy individuals now, is to discredit them. Is to say that this person is totally bonkers. Yeah. All right. And in doing so, you not silence, but you reduce the people that listen to you.
Okay, yeah.
But here the facts don't lie. All right. So Brian decides to say, listen, I want to do this chat. I want to do this interview with David Icke. And when they have that interview, in which he talks about what we've just spoken about, 5G, the virus, what he believes it's not a virus, and it's to do with 5G and other things, right? So you can go ahead and watch. Well, you can't. This is what I'm coming to now, right? I was going to say you can go ahead and watch that interview, but there's a problem. The problem is this. When the video was released, the day after or on that night, YouTube took the video down. Okay, so Brian says, I'm a bit confused. I've contacted YouTube. What's going on? All right. And they are well aware, both David and Brian, that Ofcom, who control the media body, have said that you're not supposedly allowed to talk about COVID and 5G. All right. So there's a question mark there as why, but YouTube and other platforms don't have that, don't have those guidelines. So you're free to say what you want. Okay. Now the thing is, David has quite a lot of following. All right. And I've got to say that previous videos he's done with Brian, they've had hits that reach the millions. So there are voices and people that are interested in hearing his argument. Okay. Why was the video taken down? Why has I think Brian, I don't know if Brian's had a response back as to what's going on, but he's trying to understand what's going on, and he's trying to put it on different platforms. But why would you take a video down and know and that this video was potentially going to have a mass appeal? A lot of people are going to go and follow or listen to this video. The amount of, I think, they were predicting that it was going to smash records, in terms of, because he was going out there talking about, I don't know if he was naming, I don't know, I think he did name names.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, but the thing is, it was taken down. That is something that I have a problem in understanding, and I don't like. Someone has if someone has something to say and they have a platform in which to say it, they are fully, we live in what we call a society where we're allowed to express ourselves freely. Okay? Freedom of speech, we call it.
Yeah, freedom of speech.
And so no matter how loony you may think this guy is, but he has every right to have his freedom of speaking and suggesting what he wants. And it's up to the people like you and I to make up our minds as to whether we think there's any truth to this or not. So that thing that they done,
it's a bit weird, isn't it?
It is weird, and it's
because he's done it with him before as well. He was saying, so it's like, why did they do it to that specific video? Yeah. So,
but this is, again, these are questions where they need answering. You are not gonna, if there is no truth in any of this, then there needs to be a dialogue. Yeah. Where you can't just silence the masses and say, listen, this is all rubbish, just listen to what we're asking you to do, and that's the truth. You're entitled to ask your questions and have a platform in which you have those questions and then debate the answers and think, well, this is not right because of this and that and the other. By ignoring it, taking it off, knowing that it's getting traction is not, there's something not right there. Now, because of that, people are getting curious. Why did you take it down? He's making links between 5G and COVID, and you're like, nope, don't want to hear this. Nope. The people don't need to know this. This is where people who may have not agreed with the narrative are thinking, what's going on? Why are you deciding to do this? Who are these people that are saying that, nope, you can't do this? And today, like I said, I've presented you statements, nothing from my own doing. I'm giving you my personal experiences, obviously, but everything I've mentioned is through something that you can Google and search yourself. And this isn't Wikipedia. This is government bodies that are saying to you, this isn't contagious, or, the 5G, a nurse is explaining to you about interfering with oxygen in your cells. You can get oximeters. Like I said, the knowledge is there. You just got to open up your mind and thinking, all right, why is this guy being, restricted to his rights of freedom of speech?
Yeah.
All right. So now we know what state we're in, okay, with all this lockdown and what have you. Now,
yes.
Did you know Sweden,
okay,
has not put its country in lockdown?
Okay, no, I didn't know that.
All right. So most of Europe is under lockdown.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Sweden is chilling.
Okay.
All right. They're relaxed. Businesses are open. Work is open. Schools are open. Everyone's trying to live some sort of normal life. There have been some restrictions, i.e. gatherings of no more than 50. But other than that, people are free to move with each other. Now, do they know something that we don't? It's like, okay, so do people know about that? I don't know. There's a question I'll leave out for you to think about. For those of you who may think, how and why would the government, especially when our commander-in-chief, Bojo, bless him, he's in intensive care right now. Yeah. All right.
Was he getting better?
Yeah, they say yes. Yeah. So you've got him in intensive care. Why would the government do this? There's no truth in this. Or could it all this be a planned demic?
Wow.
Right. I'll leave you with these two statements, all right? A great man once said, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power, because they control the minds of the masses. Malcolm X. All right? So that comes back to media and manipulation. All right? This game, if it is a game, isn't a new thing. It's happened before. But we now have the ability and the technology to understand it better, to ask more questions, sensible questions that command answers. All right? And there's one thing that David said, which is similar to Malcolm's statement. In what he said is, he said, the key to human control is control of human perception. If you control information, you control perception, and from perception comes behavior. The two are very similar in their messages. Yeah. Okay. Who are the people that are controlling the perception, human perception? Media. Yeah. And if they have the narrative, then you're more likely to believe that narrative. Okay. what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish on something personal.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately and sadly, our family's been hit with such an incident. Lost my father's sister to supposedly COVID-19, right?
Mm.
I don't believe that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She had a list of health issues. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
She had a heart attack. And sadly, she was taken into hospital a few days ago. And she was told that she has died after testing positive from COVID-19, not from COVID-19. Okay? So these are the things. We're living in times that are very strange and very uncertain. And in times of uncertainty, it's important for us as Muslims to hold on to the Book of Allah.
Mm-hmm.
And at times like this, when we're all huddled together, to have that time of peace and seek refuge with one's Lord, and ask and make dua for everyone around us that things become more clearer for us. Yeah, inshallah. But I think we'll wrap it up at that. It's been an interesting podcast. I haven't been, like I said, I was meaning to do one a lot earlier, but with all of this stuff going around, it was a bit crazy. And I thought, you know what, when I'd sit down, I want to get my information. I want to be able to dissect this as best I possibly can and leave you guys with my thoughts for you to opinionate and go out and do your research, find out. There's a lot of stuff circulating. Don't be tunnel vision into just going with what you want. Be open-minded and exercise and people should exercise the ability to ask questions. And that's the way we as human species grow and understand. So what you can do is please spread, spread and share this video, okay, which is actually an audio, on YouTube. And you can find us at www.minimalisticmuslim.com. Subscribe to the podcast and you'll be able to know when the new podcasts are coming up. And also, once that's done, I would upload this to YouTube and and share and subscribe on there. We're on Spotify, we're on Google, we're on iTunes. So share the message, guys. So I don't know when I want to do the next one, because we're now coming up to end of Sha'ban, beginning of Ramadan. I'm not going to do one fast, but I'm going to do another one after this. Let's see how things go on. We are living in uncertain times. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. And inshallah, the intention is to release another episode quite soon. But again, I don't want to just release one because of the sake of one. I want there to be some sort of content. So bear with me, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And if you have any questions, any thoughts, any comments, email me at faisal@minimalisticmuslim.com or leave the comments on the YouTube channel, and I'll pick you guys up from there. Other than that, Iman,
Assalamu alaikum.
it's always been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay. It's been a pleasure, darling. So so from Iman and me,
Assalamu alaikum.
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.